Okay. So we'll start with the invocation. So sit on a little bit of height, and we can start right away with this idea of mental confinement and breath trafficking. I'm just checking, can you all hear me? Got a special mic? Okay. So just sitting here with your hands cupped behind your hips. Take an inhalation that draws the breath kind of up the side panel and then over the top of your shoulders. And then hold that chest that's fortified by that particular breath traffic, and then exhale slowly. And you'll notice the abdominal region retract when you exhale slowly. And still a couple normal breaths. So part of this work with the breath traffic is to deliberately put it somewhere, or notice where it goes when you're not being deliberate. So now our inhalation, we're deliberately trafficking up the side body over the shoulders, and then just exhaling, watching how the breath and abdomen will come, how the breath will cause the abdomen to come in on exhalation. So go again, inhale, sit up taller, and exhale slowly, maintaining that height. And just observe how the abdomen retracts back to the back wall of the pelvis. Then see, can you do it with your hands on your chest? So everyone close your eyes. And now there's a little kind of exterior point to traffic the breath towards. So exhale and then inhale, lift the breath up to where the hands are folded on your chest. So you'll see that's a little more of a point in the center of your chest rather than rolling over the shoulders. And then slowly again, exhale. So I hope you are happy to repeat the invocation with yourselves at home. I'll try to do a timing so that I can still do a call and response. So once more, we inhale, this time pointing the breath to culminate at the folded palms. And then a long, slow, deep exhalation. Om. Om. Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya chavaidhyakena yopakabrotam pravaram muninam Patanjalim pranjalir anatosmi. Abhapu purushakaram. Shankachakra siddharinam. Sahasra shirasam shvetam. Pranamami Patanjalim. Hari Om. So we bow our heads down and release the hands. And once more, take an inhalation up to the point where the hands had been. Head is still down. And then slowly, slowly exhale. And then we open the eyes and stretch out your legs. So this is, Becca, your class was up. So I'm trying to get this back in. Sorry. Everyone get your bolster out and prepare for Supta Baddha Konasana. There we go. Okay, so one of the really basic, easy ways to start considering breath trafficking, and also a nice way to sort of start an evening practice, assuming you've had a pretty busy day. Many of you may have already had a class with Prashant Iyengar this morning, is to do a reclining pose with particular refreshing breath. So if you want to make it a little more difficult or challenging, you could take a block on its narrow edge or its broad face and place between your feet. I have my bolster behind me, a pair of blankets to support the thighs. The block is optional. But if I use the block, I think I would choose, if I were going to do the whole time with you, just a narrow block. Again, it's optional, but it's forcing a little more external rotation and stretch to my inner thighs. You probably have a similar experience. So the bolster is a few inches back. You lift up your hips, kind of tuck your buttock flesh under on the sticky mat, drag back so it pulls your low back under you. And when you place yourself on the bolster, adjust the blanket for under your neck and skull, and drop your legs. The blanket, if it's under the outer shins as well as the outer thighs, it's better than just the hips. And then bring your arms down. You might have to kind of dig your elbows a bit to roll the shoulders under. Use your hands to elongate your head. See that your legs have nice support. And you can close your eyes for a bit. So we'll start with this idea of being in a supine triangular shape pose. So what I mean by triangular shape is that it's as if the architecture of the pose was a very large triangle, the apex of the triangle at the center of the chest, and then a wide base through your opened legs and pelvis. So many of you have been with me before. This is one of my go-tos, but it's a great way to start. Imagining the breath move in a particular geometric pattern. So as you recline, if you don't yet have your buttocks hooked under, use your hands once more. Not to have too much under your head. You want to have the angle from the forehead to the pubis or from the back of the skull to the tailbone just on an incline. So not a big pillow. That would raise your head too high. The bolster a few inches away from your waist. And I feel like I know many of you pretty well, and some names I don't even recognize the names. So I'm going to be redundant. That's one blessing a yoga teacher gets, to be redundant. But often we're told in India, and I like to remind folks that I teach, that the bolster is not there just to open your chest. More importantly, it's there to put your abdomen on an incline down. So just even accepting that idea would make you behave differently. You wouldn't be pushing your chest up so much to respond to the bolster, and you would be letting this downhill slope of the abdomen become part of your observation. So doing a unique or single cycle, exhale the breath completely, keep the abdomen reclining, and then inhale as if the breath originates from beyond the knees and swoops in from the wide base triangle, slowly, slowly, the two sides at the same speed, and then culminates at the center of the chest. That's the end of the inhalation. And then you imagine, you visualize, and you actually encourage the feeling of the breath traffic on the way out to go from the center of the chest, down the sidelines, all the way through the back wall of the pelvis, and seemingly out through the thighs and knees. And then a couple normal breaths. So arms down by your hips here, not very high, and palms up. So once more, isolated attempt. Long, slow, deep inhalation, culminating at a point in the center of your chest. And then with an exhalation, maintaining the lift of the chest despite the fact that the buoyancy of the lungs is deflating, right? Yes, of course, the breath is going out, but the chest doesn't collapse. And you don't push the chest out to get rid of the breath either. All right, now just for another maybe minute and a half, can you do several of the same triangular shaped breath in a row? So initially I always do one or two, just an isolated cycle to kind of do the daily inventory of how it's going, and then see if I can do a cluster of the same pattern. Long, slow, deep inhalation, and it feels like the breath has to kind of swoop up from the outer knees into the back wall of the pelvic bowl, back wall of the abdomen, climb up through the side ribs, and culminate at the top of the sternum. And then follow that same pattern on the way out. Now, the chest will remain lifted, but won't have the benefit of inflated lungs. And the abdomen will be even more deflated or deflating during the exhalation. So the idea of breath traffic is hand in hand with the idea of mental confinement. You're trying to confine your mind into a particular locale, or in this case, a moving shape. And it works in that we can stimulate and observe other parts of the body that may be neglected or not known if we just go with our usual techniques, or if we go maybe for our aches and pains. So having attended to the usual discomforts, made yourself comfortable. Most people are pretty happy in this pose. Long, slow, deep inhalation, and then prolonged exhalation. Now, for the next few cycles, recognize that the exhalation can widen the pelvis, extend out through the inner knees as well. So even though the abdominal area is very much descending in our exhalation, we can start using a little foreshadowing for external rotation for a few other poses that require us to have externally rotated thighs. So now the breath can kind of move with that idea, turning the thighs out and elongating the inner thighs. Okay, so one thing about this work, it's a little bit important in class when trying to teach it, and also when you're trying to be a student in it, that you don't abruptly change your breath pattern because the teacher may say, okay, come up now. So we're going to come up, and when you finish the next cycle, or maybe you want to do two more, those of you who are belted will have to sit up first. If you're not belted, you can just pull the knees up. But when you're ready, when you feel like you've completed this idea of triangular shaped breath, then we're all going to come up. So automatically, the mind part of our triad, body, breath, and mind, gets pretty serene when we start lying down and following the breath and patterns. And it's an evening class since the end of a weekend, so we can continue with that state of mind. But everyone arrange your mat, stand up on your feet, arrange your mat so you can do a triangle pose. And if you still want to be watching, that's fine. But of course, everybody's tuned into Zoom now. You don't want to keep glued to the screen. Okay, so stand up in Tadasana for a moment. Join your legs nicely together, and you have the opposite of external rotation thighs now, right? But they still can be quite long. So lift up your pelvis, lift up your side chest, lift up your armpits, extend your arms down. Then either stepping or jumping the legs apart. So here again, they're not really externally rotated, they're just spread wide. But the inner thigh awareness is starting to come to the surface. Left foot in, right leg out. There's nothing really brand new about your triangle pose. You've been doing it for decades. But now, can you take a breath? That inhalation culminates up on your sternum, and then on the exhalation, widen your pelvis so that you have that same idea that, oh, I'm broad in my pelvis, and the inhalation had kind of come to a point in the center of my chest. So let's try that again while entering. Come up. So we're going to inhale up to the top of the triangular pattern, and then exhale. It's a tilted triangle. But you're going to exhale and widen your pelvis, sensitive to the inner thighs. And then, of course, you hold, you stay, you maintain. And then you take normal breaths, and then another deliberate one. So our triangle is a little askew, it's tilted. But can you draw your inhalation from the top of your right thigh and the outer left hip as if it came from there and then culminates up at a point at your chest? Just, it's like coloring with two pens, one in each hand, right? So inhale up to the center of the chest and see how that does elongate your triangle. Maintain that, don't shrink back. Exhale, the abdomen goes back into itself and broadens the pelvis. Once more, inhale into the point of the chest, front sternum, and exhale, flatten the abdomen to the back wall, widening your pelvis further and further. And then come up. Take your feet forward, just rest for a bit with your hands on your hips, chest up nicely. Feet forward. And then your second side. So we're going to coordinate the movement into the next stage of the pose with the movement of our breath. So we're going to inhale. Of course, other things happen than only your chest. And as you exhale, the abdomen retreats. And we try to keep the pelvis very wide here. So you're noticing, I'm sure, that the right side of your pelvic bowl has more width than the left side. So we have to come up off, crowding the left side of the pelvis. Now another attempt with the deliberate pattern of the breath. Inhale to the center of the chest. Maintain whatever improvement that brought. And exhale, widen your pelvis. Come up. Turn your feet forward. And then join your legs. Then we can add kind of another group of instruments, another thought that would duplicate that simple pattern. So just watch first. I have the same idea in mind here. I'm going to inhale and help my chest lift. Exhale, widen the pelvis. But then I'm going to inhale again into my chest. And on the exhale, widen my pelvis and the gap between the two shoulders. So I want to try to match that. I'm pulling back this left hip and also pulling back the left shoulder, broadening the right abdomen and broadening here on the down arm as well. So the exhalation is going to go horizontally, it's tipped, right? But from the arm part and the pelvic part. So you subdivide your intention on your breath. Okay, you ready? Left foot in, right leg out. We're going to enter the same way we did. Breath up, chest pointed up at the top. Exhaling, go wide, wide, wide on the way over. Settle into your pose. And maybe you want to do, before we add the chest part or the widening of the collarbone area, do one more inhale to the center of the chest. Exhale, broaden your pelvis more. You find out as you broaden your pelvis, other things happen. Like if I'm trying to lift this left hip, I have to be harder on the outer margin of that same side foot. If I'm trying to broaden here on the crowded area, I have to lengthen my chest and lift up my navel and spin the waist. So inhale to the chest, exhale, broaden the pelvis. Now just see, can you inhale to the chest and exhale, widen both the shoulder girdle and the pelvic girdle. Usually we feel a little more space when exhaling after having exhaled because you're a little hollow, and hollowness is spacious. Okay, come up. Let's see if you can manage that on your other side. So the little gimmick is to remember this, triangular shape. Kind of direct it when you get there. And then we added widening the chest after we practiced this triangle for a bit. Ready on side 2? Inhale. And exhale, widen the pelvis as you tilt it. It's kind of complicated. And then try again. Inhale to the point of the chest, center chest. Exhale, widen your pelvis. The one in the air has more room, so it might be responsible for widening both sides. Inhale to the top of the head, center of the chest. My head responded. Exhale, now widen both the arms apart and the 2 hips. And just see if you're really deliberate in patterning your breath, if some new opening doesn't come. Try it a couple more times. And then come up. And everyone join your legs. All right, so now we have this. We had a broad pelvis and a pointed chest, but then we ended up also getting some response out of our shoulder girdle, adding another dimension to it. So take a look first. I'm just going to put a diagonal mat because I think you can see more, but you won't be diagonal on your mat. I just have a diagonal mat on the stage, and this one is confusing. So when you have to support yourself on your legs, then it's harder to be so sophisticated and subtle with your breath. So shoulders down, buttocks under. We're going to go immediately over to Padangusthasana 2 and try to inhale from this shape to the chest. I have to favor my other left shoulder a little bit. And on the exhalation, try to widen the pelvis on the one leg. This is not externally rotated, but we've got this idea of where we can kind of target the breath to help the shape of the pose. So everyone on their back. I'm going to take a different view so I can see a little. Now, if you have an issue with your hip, you feel you need to support your leg, this work, we try to go for longer holds and more breath. So, of course, you could put your bolster under your right leg if needed. All right, so just get settled on your back for a bit. Shoulders under, hips under, centered. Middle of your skull, shoulders tucked under, the buttocks and low back elongated. Okay. Then bring up your right leg, belt it. And get into Padangusthasana 2 when you're ready. So you're there, you've gotten there, you moved there, you were certainly breathing while you were getting there, but now that the movement has stopped, can we paint a little more deliberate traffic pattern with the movement of the breath? So exhale, and when you exhale, the abdominal cavity will deflate even further. And then when you inhale, see that it affects the nice lift of your chest and the anchored points of your shoulders. You may have to work a little on your left. And then on the exhalation, flatten the abdomen further, 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 but notice how that sideways leg, external rotated leg, is remembering the work you did in Trikonasana, remembering the work you did in Supta Baddha Konasana. So we're brushing parts of the body with mental awareness by directly putting the breath as if that were the brush. Inhale, lift the center of your chest. Exhale, extend through the inner thigh and the interior of the pelvis on the right there. Left leg, keep it on its own. Really strong, straight in line with your mat. And it's a kind of a one-sided, wide pelvis at this point. 2 more breaths like that. Or 3, if you think, oh, I really need 1 more because I'm getting some new information, some feedback is coming to me, then don't feel you have to just be exactly with my pacing. It's more of an internal exploration. But after 1 or 2 more breaths, just both legs joined, and then we'll do the other side in just a bit. So anyone who was really hoping this was going to be your daily aerobic workout and you were going to get a lot of exercise, sorry, it's not that kind of class. It's more of training your mind to follow your breath and then telling your breath to do. Here we go, second leg, off to the side. I'm trying to take a really basic approach to how we might begin to think about how moving the breath actually defines the architecture of individual postures better and more for our deeper understanding. So you're there, right? You're inhaling, you're trying to center the chest lifted, but you realize, oh, I have to prioritize a little extra work on my right shoulder here with the left leg to the side. So you might kind of turn up the pressure of the breath on that right shoulder a little bit to help you. So rather than demanding your shoulder blade, your abdominal muscles, or your shoulder muscles to keep that shoulder down, ask the breath to help you keep your right shoulder down. And then we're working still with that wideness through the leg and the back of the pelvic bowl. You know, and it's in the anterior surface of the pelvic bowl. Okay, now see that you're not hardening your left arm by pulling on the strap too hard. Reach for the foot. If you get the foot, use the foot, forget the belt. But pulling in with a bent arm is going to harden your left side of your neck some. So reach out, breathe in by lifting your chest, and breathe out by deepening the abdomen further and further and assisting that wide, wide leg. So 1 or 2 more attempts, and then both legs together. Okay, so turn over and just look at your screen for a bit. So we're going to do Supta Padangusthasana again, and this time you're going to count breaths. So we're going to do the same inhale to here, exhale to help the pelvis and the abdomen. 1 breath to get sideways, another breath to improve wherever you've landed, and then 3 breaths to just maintain it. So this is an idea of not always making better and more. So I'll be starting with this 1 leg up. Inhale to my chest, exhale sideways, and then think, oh, I could do better than that. So I'm going to inhale and open my chest more, and exhale, do my leg more, and then hold the best I've done for 3 breaths. Same pattern, but the idea now is, can I just hold the shape of the pose and dig a little deeper to the interior awareness? After that 3rd breath, really it was your 5th breath, you'll come up, join the 2 legs on the floor for a moment, and prepare for the 2nd side. So now we have another concept going, which is entering into a pose, improving a pose, and then maintaining and stabilizing a pose. all of this kind of mental work prepares us so nicely for pranayama. So when ready, you'll get your leg up there and you'll enter with one really monitored breath. And once you're there, you think, well, things were sort of shaky to get me here. So do one more breath to improve the presentation. Not for me, I'm only seeing a postage stamp worth of you, but your own understanding. And then 3 more breaths to hold it as steady and still as you can. It's not to actually require to get better at it, but also to maintain, don't allow any, kind of fading of what you've achieved. And then after that 5th breath, you'll just come up, put both legs in a neutral zone, and take a moment to do an evaluation when you've got both legs down in that neutral zone. So yes, the body has stopped moving, but the mind has a new function now, which is to measure, which is to evaluate, which is to narrate the response to yourself. So you develop your language there in your neutral moment. Now, when you're ready, same project, a 5-breath project, to the second side. So one breath gets you there. The very next breath admits that you didn't get there as well as you wanted to. So you improve. And then 3 more breaths to simply train maintenance beyond always striving for more and more. After the 5th breath, you get back to both legs neutrally placed on the floor. And then you're free, that your body's done. You're not asking your breath to do anything deliberate. So now the mind can say, okay, now what was that? And what did I observe? And how would I improve or do differently if I had another chance? How would I describe that effect? What language would I use? So we get back to neutral, and then the active kind of journaling happens. You start to use your intellect, your mental language to fortify your understanding. If you're just doing, it's not the same as doing with commentary. All right, so once you feel like, yeah, okay, I was down there, I had my moment or two of reflection, I tried to describe it to myself, I understand, then turn over and sit up. And I'm just gonna take one moment to see if anyone is really totally confused and needs different language. So anybody who wants to ask a question now, this is the time before we do the next example.
So I have a question, Laurie.
Hey, Nancy.
Were we working in that one more on the side of the abdomen of the horizontal leg?
Yeah, you could have been. I mean, it's kind of like triangle pose in that you're tipped over and you don't have that beautifully open symmetrical pelvis like you do in Buddha Konasana. So that was another kind of implied bit with the sequence so far. Buddha Konasana equal, left and right side, triangle trying to be equal in the pelvis, and this one really even less obviously equal. So when I try to impose a pattern onto a variety of poses and I realize, well, it's not going to be as clean as the initial one, that's information too. But yeah, I was hoping that you were working on the sideways horizontal bit because that's where we started. Anybody else? Does that answer, Nancy? Okay. All right, so the whole idea of the lesson is to have some illustrations of how this whole breath trafficking thing works. So now we're going into another supine pose. You're going to be doing Supta Virasana. Now wait one sec, watch mine. It's possible I'm hoping most of you know your own body and your way to do Supta Virasana, but it has to be not a big battle. You know, it can't be super hard for you for this breath work to work. So I'm going to show an alternative. Ideally, you'd have a normal sized bolster. You could settle in and be in your Supta Virasana. And we're going to be using elbows back over the head. So it's very rectangular shaped pose now, all the way from my knees to my elbows. But if the battle with your pelvis and or your thighs is too much, I always think it's just fine to have one leg up and one leg down. We can have those who elect to do it this way. Halfway through, I'll change and you'll have an opportunity to change legs. Now, you maybe don't need that. But if Supta Virasana is something that you can't pensively and quietly focus on your breath in, you need a modification for tonight's lesson. So let's see what you choose. Supta Virasana. Of course, you may know, I have to build up my bolster, or I need rolls under my ankles. I use such and such for my knees. If Virasana is totally off the plate menu for you, then you could do Swastikasana, Supta Swastikasana. So in Baddha Konasana, the breath culminated in the front body and came from almost off the sides of the knees up to apex. Here, the front body won't get the maximum lift. The side bodies will get more elongated. So once you get settled, you can have your hands on your bottom ribs for a moment or two until your breath gets happy. What's going on, Jenny? Bad knee? Okay. But once you are settled and you think, okay, yes, I can have a quiet face and my brain is settled in the back of my skull, then go ahead and take your elbows over your head. Have a light grasp on your elbows. Exhale completely. Your abdomen, of course, will recede, but you can make it recede more. And then pause briefly so you can get your breath traffic tools out. It's kind of mental imagination there. And breathe from the depth of your groins up the side panels of your chest to your elbows and beyond. So each inhalation is going to lengthen the side panels of the torso. And then when you exhale, the breath will come out of the body, but the side panels don't have to shrink. So that's a very interesting moment where the inhalation mechanically improves the extension, and the exhalation has to maintain the extension even though the breath isn't helping you lengthen anymore. It's the opposite almost. So inhale, lengthening the side panels all the way to the elbow tips and beyond. And then exhale, deflate the abdomen further and further and further, and pause at the end of the exhalation and add what Guruji used to call an echo exhalation. It's sort of the residual breath that never really gets expelled. Supplemental exhalation. It's almost like a full ujjayi and then a little bit more. Find out if you have residual air that you don't completely exhale. So the tailbone should be elongated. We want not to let incoming breath bloat the abdomen. It could, it can, it does. And so you have to watch that you can start to train that tendency out of your breath work. The easiest way if you happen to be a person whose abdomen bloats with inhalation, then the easy way to train that out of your breathing in yoga is to notice how deep your abdomen can get while exhaling, and then just impose a restrained bit of effort to keep the abdomen down, and you'll find out that there's another way to inhale that doesn't involve bloating your belly. But it's pretty common. A lot of us do breathe that, and during the day we do. We breathe forward into the abdomen for different sets of circumstances. Not here, however. All right, now the few of you who are opting for one leg, that was totally fine. When you get another moment to finish an exhalation, you could come up and change which leg you're going back. If you're doing a swastikasana, a few of you are, you can still have the elbows over your head and consider the side panels of your chest to receive the impetus of elongating during inhalation, and then the abdomen will feel different in cross legs as virasana legs, but still you can deflate it and make it very deep. So maybe you switched your legs if you're doing one at a time, but a couple more big, strong, elongating inhalations. See if you can get the ribs to separate, the vertebrae to extend, and then a deeper, deeper abdomen on the exhalation. It's tempting to just go to sleep here. It's dark already in Michigan, but see that you don't, that you remain very astute in your observations, even though it's not physically demanding right now. Give it 2, maybe 3 more breaths. Make sure you finish the breath work with a sense of completion, not to just pop out because the teacher may be suggesting the next thing. So 2 or 3 more, and then everybody will come up and extend their legs. So once you've extended your legs, the next asana we're going to practice this idea. The whole workshop was advertised as commonly practiced asanas. So I'm not interested in throwing out any wild cards or fun, entertaining new things while we try to learn this idea. So it's Adho Mukha Svanasana. I've got a block and a little pad on the block. Any kind of support. If you want to use a rope wall, that would be fine. Thumb and index fingers against the wall would be okay and quite good. If you're independent, like I'm trying to show here with a demo, I will have a belt to help keep my arms going, maintaining the straight arms, and a little head support. Keep watching for a second. I don't want to waste too much of your time watching me do yoga. But so I'm down here. And I might even grab the mat if I like, right? Or decide that's not necessary. But then I want to see, can I inhale on the sides of the body, including the length of the arms? And can I exhale, retract the abdomen further and further and further? Then a couple normal breaths. So the pose, when I take a couple normal breaths in between deliberate breaths, the pose sort of flattens itself a little bit. And then I try again with a really deliberate inhalation for the arms and side body and exhalation for your abdomen. Let's see that happen for you. So some support is helpful. Head support, remember, is not between your hands. It's away from your hands. Right, and so, that's the other thing interesting about Zoom. Everybody doesn't get ready at the same speed as the other guys. It's okay. But if you're already there and you've done it for a few times and you need to come down, either in Adho Mukha Virasana or step forward for Uttanasana, that's okay. That would be your call if you wanted to have a reprieve. All right, so do your best. Get into today's best yet. Then find out once you're settled in it, can you do some deliberate breath work, elongating from the pressure of your palms, up your arms, through your elbows, through your shoulders, through the side ribs, through the waist, through the buttocks and beyond when inhaling, and exhaling, maintain that length, even though the breath is coming out, maintain that length, and notice the retraction of the abdomen. It like sucks upward and adheres to the overturned pelvic bowl. And then you might take a normal breath or two and you realize, oh, these normal breaths, they're kind of flattening my pose a bit. So then you reconstitute and you do another very deliberate inhalation followed by an excellent exhalation. So that I would call that a discrete cycle of breath. And then you might find, okay, I'm ready to do a cluster of 3 or 4 or 5 breaths with that same intention. So that you're making the breath improve the pose, possibly 3, 4, 5 breaths in a row. Now, what I find when I do a cluster, the intensity dials down a little bit. A single breath can be super intense, but if I want to do 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, I have to dial down the intensity a lot, or some anyways, to maintain a standard. So you learn to find out, well, how much effort do I absolutely have to use if I have to be here for a long time, right? So you learn to budget your effort. Okay, so give it another breath or two if you're still doing that, and then come down on your hands and knees, Adho Mukha Virasana. All right, so I don't want to rush you because I have a certain kind of state of mind I'd like us to work with this evening, but I also don't want to get dull in between attempts. So now the options, next will be headstand for those who do it. So first I have to show an option for those who do not. You already did your downward dog with head support. You could do that again if you're not doing headstand. But we could also have just an Uttanasana where I'm going to inhale up my legs and then turn the corner and go out through my armpits so it looks like this. And then I maintain that and exhale. So we can all do this for a brief minute. And then those who won't do headstand will alternate between that and down dog. And the rest of you, if you just take a minute to watch. Once I'm up, I want to find, can I inhale the sides of my chest and exhale, deflate my abdomen more and more. So I find that when I direct my breath here, the usual stuff that has to happen for better shoulder lift comes right along for the ride with the breath. So it's like I don't have to tell my muscles to do it. My breath will suggest to my muscles, and then I'm not the bossy one anymore. The breath is. All right, so first we're doing an Uttanasana, everybody, a concave one. Just have another breath pattern going. You're gonna have lower tall blocks. Get in your pose. Vandana, move your blocks a little more forward so you have room for your side chest. They can go down or up, but the forward would be more length for you. That's a little too far forward, Alicia. You want your arms under your shoulders. So nice to see you people. All right, so plant your feet. And then just think, okay, I'm gonna exhale the breath and trace up the back of my legs And then turn the corner at the pelvis and continue to inhale out from under the armpits. So that's one inhalation. Then exhale the abdomen up higher and higher and higher. Then maybe a couple normal breaths. If coming out from the under the armpits isn't working so well, you might do better with taller blocks. So try it again. Exhale completely. Pound the feet and then begin. Inhale up the back of the legs, turn the corner at the buttock bones, extend through the side chest, out from under the armpits, through the lifted chin, and then exhale, retracting the abdomen up higher and higher and higher. And what does directing the breath do for you? I mean, I could be shouting other things about muscles and joints, but now we're just trying to find out, what if I have just a directed breath pattern? Will the muscles and joints do other things for me? And if I recruit that kind of result from using my breath instead of using just mechanical body movements, what's the difference in my mind? So do 2-3 breaths in a row. Do a cluster. All right, so if you're not going to stand on your head, you could come up with your hands on your hips for a reprieve. You could do down dog again. But those who want to try brushing the breath in a headstand and kind of curious, search for what response you get when you're actually kind of telling your breath to traffic rather than telling, using some other form of management. Tonight, we're trying to manage our poses with breath traffic. So you'll get up there, or you'll repeat down dog, or you'll repeat Uttanasana. So you get there, and it's like before. You thought you were going to get there with a nice smooth breath, but you get there and you realize, no, this isn't my best yet. So I'm going to have to take a breath to kind of tidy up. Maybe I have to take several breaths. But then you're there. And now for the maintenance stage, because inversions are usually held for some time. After a certain amount of practice, they're not a 30-second pose. They're a 3-minute or a 5-minute or a 10-minute pose. So now, without having to do much more than direct your breath, right? So exhale the breath, and then imagine the breath starting from the forearms, going up the upper arms, through the shoulder joints, up the side panels of your body, up the side hips. When you get to the legs, you can do outer legs and inner legs, but everything up when you inhale. And then exhale retracts the abdomen towards the spine. And as before, you might want to do an isolated single cycle, return to normal breath. Because when you do it just as a one-off, you can do it really, deliberately and quite intensely. So when you're ready to do another one, prepare from exhalation and then go. And again, as that was a one-off, then the following exhalation, inhalation, and exhalation is a little normal. And then decide after, so now when you're on the normal breath, it's sort of that neutral moment again. Granted, you still have to hold yourself up in your headstand, but you can do some journaling. You can reflect upon the effect. You can describe it to yourself. You can strategize how you might use it differently. And then now try a cluster of holding your Shirsasana with that particular inhale up the side panels of your body, trunk, and when we get to the legs, it can be the inner panel and the outer panel. And then the exhalation to kind of scrub back against your interior of your abdominal cavity wall. Can you do a cluster of 3 or 5 or 8 breaths? Otherwise, you can be in Adho Mukha Virasana, Adho Mukha Svanasana, concave Uttanasana, but still keep with this idea of, tonight I'm trying to practice consistently with patterning my breath in a way that doesn't contradict the architecture of the asana. So another 2 minutes, if you like. You can come down between now and the end of 2 minutes, which I'll call for you. You know, after a while, you know what a minute feels like in a headstand. A minute in a different pose will feel like a different minute. But the idea is not to abruptly come down, but to finish your, quiet, strategic, methodical work in trying to explore this whole idea of breath traffic. If you're down, it's fine. Okay, so everyone come down. Take a moment to rest. Just rest the neck and shoulders. And then turn to the side and take a little look at your device. The other thing about this work is you can't really rush it. And so you don't get a huge variety of things done in a 90-minute class. All right, so I built up 2 blocks and blankets on top of my blocks. And this isn't such a big bolster, so I put a few blankets underneath it. I've made a soft Setuban bench. If you have a real firm one you can use. I don't think we want to really do blocks right now, just because we're trying to keep really quiet in the mind. So you could set this up. Now you want to be able to drag yourself over. I'm going to tie my legs. In general, all these things we know that support the poses, they're helpful on a breath night. Right? I could hold my legs myself, but if I want to focus on my breath, maybe I'll just ask the belt to help me. Okay, so we'll be here with a tremendous width to the chest. Now we've been mostly thinking about the side panels. Are you still watching and listening? I hope you are. We've been thinking about the side panels or the front, but now I want to get on my back body and kind of inhale to roll the shoulders down, and then exhale again to flatten the abdomen. Right, so the chest, the front body is exposed just because of the equipment anyways. So we haven't done much on the back body. So I want to say, okay, well, what if I consider the movement of the breath on the back body? Maybe I can show if I don't talk. And then long, long exhalations. Okay, so set that up. It's not as obvious because your chest is so brilliantly pushed forward given the bolster and all, but you can still put your mind on the back body. So some sort of Setuban. I belted my legs. You could if you wanted, So it's kind of interesting. You're in kind of you're certainly in a Setu Bandha chest situation, in which we could on another day choose to direct the breath to the front body. But notice now when you're trying to stroke your inhalation on your back body, how the shoulder blades respond, how your waist also responds. And then long, long exhalations with flatter, flatter abdomen. Get your shoulders on the ground. Scooch off enough that your shoulders are indeed on the ground. Settle in before you get too creative with your breath. First, you have to be comfortable enough so that the artistry of stroking the breath in a pattern is artistic. If it's a struggle, then that's another kind of practice. I'm pro working hard on your postures. You know, we have to beat out some of our restrictions, but that's not the theme of tonight. So make the pose doable, comfortable enough, so you're free to really understand the traffic of your breath and not fighting with the posture. So maybe your feet have to be higher. Find out. When you're ready, inhale by drawing the shoulders even under further and pressing the shoulder blades into the back ribs. And then exhale, deflate the abdomen further and further and further and ever more further. Maybe you think you're done exhaling, you pause and you exhale again, that echo exhalation, the supplemental exhalation. Being absolutely sure the residual breath is expelled, so that's fresher for your lungs. But also it intensifies the abdominal contraction, the Uddiyana contraction, which is a major preparatory bandha for pranayama. So we learn how to work the pranayama abdomen in asana by extending exhalations. Now, if you overdo, you may feel your throat get tight or the eyebrow area, your jaw, your ears. Don't overdo. My hope had been that the brain and face would stay quiet for the entire 90 minutes of tonight's lesson. So check that as well, that you're not so enthusiastic with the shoulder blade thing that you create tension in your neck and throat or face. So the front body is by design really pressed open. That's the pose, that's the props. But we're still trying to take the back body as the breath pattern for inhalation. Exhalation, we're just figuring out, okay, if my legs are together and belted, what's the shape of my abdomen when I prolong my exhalation? So now decide to do a cluster of 3 or 5. Exhale and then choose. Will you do 3 more breaths? Will you do 5 more breaths? When you finish your cluster, again, recognizing doing an isolated breath is a different kind of intensity than a cluster of breaths. When you finish your selected number, then you'll come down. Okay, once you're down, you're gonna look at the screen one more time. So if you're not doing shoulder stand, you have two options. One would be a pretty carny against the wall. Of course, that's not a good option if menstruating, but if you have some reason you don't do your shoulder stand, but you could do, this pose up against the wall, or even you just think, oh, I like that idea, I want to choose that. That would be an option. If, however, you're menstruating, I would say go back to Supta Baddha Konasana. It's going to be completely different at the end of class than before. But before you do that, if that's your option, continue to watch for a second. So now we're going to have a full body inhalation that starts from the back of the skull, follows the neck, goes up the back body, over the buttocks, and down into your feet in plow pose. So I had that bolster there. I mean, if again, the principle of if feet on the floor plow pose is a physical battle for you, then have a chair or something for your feet. But now we want to have a breath pattern that is the whole body, but it's going to start from my skull. And then the whole exhale. So I'm going to inhale here first to the armpits, and then exhale, go up over the top of my legs and out to my feet. Take a couple normal breaths. Then I'm going to try to do it on the inhalation and the belly in for exhalation. Or I inhale just here and do that whole up and over the top on exhalation. So a little more complicated, a little more variety to keep you interested. And we will kick up for a minute or two when you're done working your plow pose. Options are, again, Supta Baddha Konasana, be pretty carny on the wall, or supported some sort of plow pose. And here, again, if you're confused, let me know. So good, I see many of you choosing to elevate your feet because you're working on some sort of concept of breath patterning. So we can't be battling with our poses right now. We want to take some of that struggle away so we can do a deeper idea of the breath work. Be pretty carny, Supta Baddha Konasana, Halasana, Ardha Halasana. Let's see what you do. So we're going to do the head down the length of the neck, up the spine, and over the buttocks to the feet. It's an uninterrupted whole back body breath pattern. But sometimes we're going to do it on the inhalation, and sometimes we're going to do it on the exhalation. So get settled in. Okay, now say you choose Viparita Karani. You can inhale across the chest and exhale, sliding the legs further down the wall and deepening the pit of the groins by the corner of the pubis. Supta Baddha Konasana, you have your large triangle. So those are the three choices. We were doing some sort of plow pose, Viparita Karani, or a repetition of Supta Baddha Konasana, but at the end it's going to be way different. Okay, so let's do three first, where the inhalation is kind of going to the side chest and armpits. And the exhalation will seem to go from the skull, under the neck, up the back of the spine, over the buttocks, and down the legs to the toes. And then a couple normal breaths. All right, so we're drawing the big, big line on exhalation for a few attempts. So inhale, armpit chest and front chest, and exhalation, back of the skull, length of the neck, up the spine, over the hips, and out the legs, uninterrupted. It isn't like a vector, body going up to hips and legs going up to hips. It's a continuation. It's a longer full body breath. You're trying mostly on your exhalation now. Maybe you've decided to try a cluster, or maybe you're doing isolated ones. So keep with that. The exhalation really scribing the whole back surface of you from skull to feet. Your hands could be certainly on your back, helping the breath, they're like little arrow signs telling the breath to go up your back. All right, so one or two more, and when you're finished with your first or last or second to last one, when you're finished, normal breathing. Then see, can you switch having the exhalation, or excuse me, the inhalation be from skull to buttocks to feet, and then find out what the exhalation brings you. All right, so that before we had done the line, the breath pattern on exhalation, now you're doing it on inhalation, and rather than determining what the exhalation will show you, I suggest you just find out what it does show you, rather than making it show you a particular thing. And again, the precept of isolated attempts with normal breathing in between until you've got a clear idea and you feel motivated to work on a cluster of the same pattern. And if you need to come down, you should. So hopefully you've come up with some sort of lab report about, okay, now that sort of inhalation did this to the shape of my pose, and then the subsequent exhalation was such and such, right? So I could say, and then you would look particularly for that, or you could be a little bit more of an explorer and just find out what gets revealed to you. But when you're ready and you want to kick your legs up, go ahead and have your legs in the full pose for a minute. Now you might, if you're all the way up in your full Sarvangasana, you might come up with a breath pattern you'd like to scribe onto the shape of your pose. Pick one that seems to be complementary to the architecture. I mean, there's some real obvious ones that show up when you're an intermediate level or further than that level practitioner. Your poses are tidy enough. Then breath patterns sort of show you. And not, if we polled you, there'd be 3 or 4 different ones. There's not only one good one, but find one, choose one, find out. What I do is I watch to see where my breath most naturally wants to go. And then the first thing I do is to try to do that a little bit more so with more awareness. And then sometimes I pick another pattern just because I'm working on it. But do figure out for yourself now, rather than being told what to try. If you can, at the end of this lesson, get the idea of how to pattern breath traffic within this pose. Give it 2 or 3 in a row, cluster of breaths, and then everybody down. All right, so you can clear your equipment. We're going to finish now with Shavasana, but look here. I'm suggesting minimally a blanket or two under your chest and something for your head, or you could go to your full bolster, but it won't be tonight a flat down, just because we've done such a lot of nice work in exhaling. So I could have done my full bolster, or I just could do a couple blankets. I'm not suggesting you don't have to have a high something, but have a little something if don't go flat. And then I'll sort of mention another aspect of this mental confinement while you're doing your Shavasana. So set yourself up. Either on a bolster with a blanket for your head, or maybe you select just a couple blankets under your spine. And do all your careful work, all your adjusting. Don't just plop down. It wasn't at all a strenuous class. But hopefully it was a mindful class. So we're going to be in your Shavasana, get settled in it. And there's that, initial tucking and rotating and placing, and then there's the jittery nerves, and then there's the active mind. So get all that settled out. And we're going to do normal breathing, soft, right? Normal under these circumstances, right? Normal is like not one thing, but just soft, quiet, ethereal, pensive breath. We're not pumping the breath at all. But we will now, because we have for the whole lesson been watching the breath. So now keep your mind watching your breath. You may find it's touching one side differently than the other side, and you maybe can't help yourself but try to correct that. But for the most part, just observe the movement of your breath. You've got your arms extended, your legs extended, the buttock flesh tucked under, shoulders tucked under, neck nice and long. All of that was taken care of. And now you're settled and watching your breath. So the final little paradigm I'd like to introduce is that we can watch the breath from different locales. So first of all, you might imagine yourself on the ceiling of your room there, looking down at yourself, and you're observing from above. Right? You're still observing the breath, and you're feeling it within, but your point of view is looking down at you from the ceiling. Next, see, can you place your mind in the center of your chest as if you were now observing the breath from that point of view? So, I sometimes think about it if I was out west and looking at a beautiful valley, there'd be a bunch of different viewing places to look out at the mountain range or deep into the valley, and I could travel around to different parts of the very same valley and look at it from a different angle. Now you're trying to observe your breath as if your observation deck was in the center of your chest. So in addition to trafficking the breath to kind of explore the different parts of the asana architecture, there's other layers of who we are. So a real basic separation within the body is that the chest is the home of our emotional self, right? We're heartfelt there. So now, while you're just watching your normal breath, you're watching it from the locale of your emotional center. And when watching your breath from the location of your emotional center, does it change how your body feels? Does it change what your mind does when you're watching from that level of who you are? Same pose, same body, same quiet breath, but a particular mental confinement for observing from where you are observing. Chances are, when you're observing from the center of your chest, you're going to be a little bit more interested on the inhalation phase of the breath. That's understandable. It's felt in the chest. But you're still curious about exhalation and holding still and being calm. Now, can you just move your mind off that center part of your chest and just let it float wherever it needs to right now for a minute, so that when we relocate it into the abdominal cavity, you'll know you've moved your mind to a different confinement. So you have to disengage, take a moment, and then reassign your observation deck to the abdominal cavity. So Prashant teaches us, Guruji mentioned it, Gita-ji mentioned it as well, that this abdominal area is more of our sort of our volition and our creativity and our vigor and determination is a good word for it. So you're not trying to do anything hard, but now that you're watching your breath from that location, it's likely the exhalation phase of the breath will be more interesting, or at least more prevalent in your observation. So as you're just settling in to observing your breath from the point of view of your abdomen, you bring yourself down to a different aspect of your psyche, no longer emotional, more volitional. And then what effect does that have on your mind? It's not deep breathing, it's just quiet, sensitive breathing, but can you train yourself to observe it from the abdominal cavity point of view? Okay, so another moment or so of that, and then you deliberately let go so that if you reassign a new location, you know that you've started fresh. And the last location is going to be just kind of like an aura around your skull. So the brain is deep in the back of the head, but we want to soften the jaw joint, the ears, the temples, the face. So this sort of head throat region is the last and next locale that you'll be observing your breath from. And here, neither the inhalation nor the exhalation will necessarily be more prevalent. In fact, you may not even know which phase of the breath you're on. You feel it in your nose, possibly, across the aperture of your nostrils or even the pores of your facial skin. But it's that quiet and that soft. And you're now observing the breath from kind of the intellectual and sphere of who you are. And can it be an open mind? and a peaceful, quiet mind, a wise mind, sober, not extra critical, not super tight sort of mind. We know we can do that with our intellect. Can you have the soft, sweet breathing? Be observed from the cerebral part of who you are, but in a restful sort of way. So it's pretty common that the head and brain and throat is considered the thinking region. The chest, the feeling, emotional region. And the gut, the kind of intuitive and powerful region. And we can practice just being super still and just training ourselves to watch breath from all those three locations. Pretty fundamental, but it takes years of practice to be good at it. So give it another 3-4 breaths from that head region, and then gradually pull yourself out of your Shavasana. So we do that a variety of ways, but don't jerk yourself. Finish off a few more cycles. So usually what happens is the hands come to the front of the body, then the legs bend, and you're on your side for a moment or two. When you're ready, just come and sit for a moment. Okay, quiet little basic introduction to the idea of breath trafficking. I hope that you got something out of it. And I'm happy to discuss it, answer questions if you need to, but you might be just so quiet from your last Shavasana that you don't want to chat. But I'm here if anyone has anything they want to ask or mention.